I'm gonna walk around the other way this time because it's gonna be cooler. I don't know. But just trying to light up the video because it's gonna be a little bit saddening, but that's okay. So, masking your issues. And the reason why I have the other part of the video as die from the inside out is because that is more or less what your mental state will become. And I'll describe exactly what happens when you mask your issues, and I'll go into describing the conflict between solving it instead of ignoring it and how those two things differently affect your life. So, for starters, when you mask your issues, what happens? I have it written down here, so I'll say it too. It's kind of, I write small, so that's why I sometimes pause weirdly, but anyways. So, you mentally starve yourself from a healthier life since solving it is the only permanent way to stop masking your problems and dying internally. And what I mean by this, to bring it out to you better, is that when you have a problem, when you're experiencing some sort of difficulty and you don't really know what to do with it, you begin to emanate this fear towards this thing. And this fear grows over time because that is just how the brain works. It's like simple. And you starve yourself from a healthier life because when you aren't solving it and you're ignoring it, you are allowing it to build up inside your head, and you're allowing it to also be buried simultaneously, in which doing both of those will not only distract you from the problem, but also make it harder to actually find the original problem in the first place, even without distractions. So even if you aren't scrolling on your phone, or if you aren't going to a vice, is what I like to refer to, going to a vice of some sorts, it'll still be difficult to you to find the actual problem and solution ruminating from whatever you're doing. So I want to advise you of that before you decide to mask any issues or any personal health, mental health kind of considerations within your life, even physical health too. If you mask the problem that you're fat, for example, right? If you mask the problem that you're fat and then you keep eating things, the result is you're going to get more fatter and you're not going to be able to go to the problem of it, which is your overeating. Or maybe not even your overeating, but your specifications in what you eat. Diet. I don't like calling it diet because I'll go on a side tangent here. I don't like calling it diet because what it means to diet is to usually cut off or restrict other things. And I don't want you to do that. What I want you to do is to culminate a standard, and not a lifestyle, but just a way of being, is what I like to call it. Because lifestyle is too close to diet and doesn't make any sense. But when I want you to culminate a state of being, I want this state of being to say to themselves that I am a high quality person, therefore I will only eat high quality foods. Or something with the word quality in it, matched up with quality food, matched up with something that would make you feel better by doing, right? Even if it's like a negative and a positive, right? I play video games, therefore I should only eat high quality foods. It's stupid. It's going to end up reinforcing your video game habit with eating better foods, which is probably bad. But you get the idea of being able to attach these things together and then get away from being fat, which was your original problem in the first place. Now you're probably going to have a problem of wasting too much time playing video games, but that's a whole different story. So, going off of that, and hopefully not making any video game addicts, we are going to go into the next point here. And it's that when you mask your issues, you make your reality become distorted. Since, remember that fear that I talked about earlier? This fear, what it'll do is it'll drive you in an opposite direction, right? Think of yourself as a mouse, and you're just sitting in this little box. Sorry, you can't see it on camera. A mouse, and you're in a box, right? And every time you have a fear, that's a cat, basically. And the more cats you have, the less room the mouse has to go. And the mouse can only run so far until it's out of cheese reward to keep running, working, and therefore succumb to the fears, the cats, and go to vices to release its mind from what is in the present moment. Video games, drugs, alcohol, the whole nine. So, now understanding that, you become to understand that, sorry, what does this say? Yeah. So you bringing this back to like more like a human form, you begin to understand that your bubble of existence becomes smaller and smaller as you're trying to shield yourself from the fears that are around you. And as you're shielding these fears, it's just putting on another mask, right? It's basically like, how do I put this without sounding very controversial? Or maybe I do sound controversial. Fuck it. All right. So it's like the people who are scared of COVID-19 and they, oh wait, actually I don't know if I can say that on camera, but whatever. And they put a mask on in their cars, right? Putting a mask on in your car isn't gonna do shit, all right? Unless, well, no. Yeah, no, it's not gonna do shit, because if you're by yourself, it makes no sense. Like, it's not like someone just, like, no one just got into your car, went, and then just left. Like, really. But it's that fear, right? That, like, my COVID-19 point isn't the point here. The point is that that's a fear, and that fear limits how you act in your life. And rather, I would say more subconscious ways, but sometimes it's very conscious. Maybe sometimes you're very aware of how this thing interacts with your mind and body. So, understanding that, and understanding how you become a smaller bubble or a rat without running room, it culminates the ability to say to yourself that, okay, masking my issues leads to these side effects, but what about solving them, right? Because solving them has side effects too, and I will get into them shortly. So, but first though, let me get into the conflict between solving instead of ignoring, right? Ignoring the problem is the easy thing in the short term. Solving the problem is not the easy thing in the short term. Humans think in short term, naturally, because the inbuilt brain is mainly to survive, but now it's starting to adapt to thrive, right? And obviously your brain has to prioritize survive instead of thrive, because, well, if you thrive instead of survive, then you're, like, doesn't make any sense, right? So surviving is the natural instinct that your brain will take on, and if it sees that, okay, you have a problem here, it'll ignore it as long as it can until it becomes something that is so encompassing of the present moment that it is a problem to their survival, right? Because, right, the psychological issues in general, I think most of them, like minus something like anorexia or anything like that, they are problems that you can, like, oh, I can push it off. It's like, the way I'm going to think about it, right? Think about it like, okay, think about it like a fish hook, right? And let's say you're a fish, and let's say no one's at the fishing rod, right? But it's like kind of like anchored. It's like, picture a fishing rod that's anchored into the ground, like it cannot move, it will not move, right? Like, just be imaginative for a second. It will not move under any circumstances, no matter how big the fish. And it is just a line with a hook, right? Doesn't matter if there's bait on it or not, whatever. Use your imagination there. And then the fish comes up to it, and it bites on it, because for whatever reason. And then it pushes the problem. And then eventually, when you push the problem so much, remember, this fishing line doesn't move. So when it pushes the problem so much, what's most likely going to happen, because we're going to say it's also a strong string here, because, well, your fears are strong strings, the fishing hook is going to go right into the gill of the fish, and it's going to stay there. That is exactly what happens to your mental problems, right? When you push off the fear, it's exactly like a fishing hook, and it comes back and it basically stabs you, right? And understanding that part of what happens when you ignore it, and then, well, let's go into now the solving aspect, because I think you understand my point on the effects of pushing it off, right? So, for solving the problem, usually, okay, Oh, shit. Okay. I'm going to go into, because I totally forgot how I structured this video, so I apologize. I'm going to go into a couple of more points about ignoring the problem, and then we'll get to solving the problem. So, yes, I did trick you. Sorry. But anyways, so really important stuff here. So, right. And there are effects to being, I think, what Jordan Peterson calls it, willfully blind in the present moment, right? Or something along those lines. I didn't quote him or anything. But it's this idea that when you're willfully blind, you see your issue and yet you choose to ignore it because you fear the pain beyond that. I guess to put it in more of his words, darkness is something that a lot of people can't handle at first, or not handle, but they can't glance at it, right? The vanity of it is disgusting to them, so they want to avoid it. But the thing is that, as we know, humans grow from that disgusting problem that they turn to face, right? So what I want you to understand is that facing this problem that's disgusting is most likely where you're going to solve it. And I remember this quote I heard the other day, which I'm going to give it to you because I think it's going to be very valuable, is that I'm going to mess it up, I think, a little bit, but maybe I won't. I actually probably won't. Let me just try to figure it out here. It was something along the lines of, where you most want to be seen by other people is where you least want to look. And I hope that comes across in an understanding way, because I believe that's exactly how it was said. Don't quote me on that. But it's the idea of looking in that other place where you aren't looking, and you know that that's where the problem is, right? That's where you least want to look. And then you go in there and you find the thing that you most want to display to other people. So, going off of that, right? What happens when you decide to become too blind? Because there is a point where willfully blind becomes subconsciously blind. And this transition period is where you become so blind, literally blind to your problems, that you don't actually remember that it was a problem in the first place, and you just act upon your life like it is some sort of altered reality, which you don't even understand how it got there, right? So when you become too blind to your problems, that's the thing that happens, and it becomes much worse than that one event of solving the problem in the first place, because now it's deeply embedded into some sort of psychology, which can only be really figured out by some form of therapist who knows how to do this stuff, right? I'm just a guy on the internet who can talk about points, right? So please, if you are actually suffering from something like this, I recommend you go see any therapist of some sort, so that way you can get the value you need and not just listen to a random guy on the internet, because that is probably another video I need to work on. I'm going to work on a video called it'll be something about trusting other people, right? So I'll keep that in note for myself. That'll be sometime in the future, right? So now that we understand the whole process of ignoring it and the benefits of solving it, which I think most of you understand, but I'll recap the benefits of solving it real quick. So when you solve the problem, you erase the timeline of the problem existing. You erase the timeline of the fear existing. So basically, you get rid of a cat in the room and you get rid of a tightening of your bubble, right? You get to be able to release it a little bit more. Now, a lot of times people have multiple fears developed off of one fear, so it'll take a while for you to understand that you have to tackle one fear to get to the next one, and it's kind of like a layer. But I'd rather not think of it as a layer, but think of it as what a family tree looks like, where it's this person had 2 kids, they got married, that kind of thing. I want to think of it like that, where there's a certain fear at the bottom. You have to get this one first to get to the next one to get to the next one, and then after a little while, you start to understand, okay, this is the major problem, and you start to understand it a bit more. You conquer more little fears. You get to understand what the big fear is, and then you can finally conquer the big fear and then get rid of the bubbles or the rats, or not the rats, the cats in your life. So, don't mask your issues. You mentally die, and from the inside out, it makes you very small and incapable, and it positively reinforces weakness into your life, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And as always, we're here to help you help them. And I don't know how to end the video because my camera's backwards, so if you're here, hallelujah, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and it's July.